I think we're live. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Seth. We don't have Shannon today. Big crocodile tear. Her computer decided to eat itself. And I'm not really joking when I say that. It was literally doing some weird things. So, lucky Matt, he gets just the Seth treatment instead of the Seth and Shannon treatment. But we have Matt Medeiros. That's how you say it, right? Medeiros?
That's correct.
Oh, my God. Can I just say spelling your last name is so hard because there's E's and I's and I's.
E's and I's, yeah.
But it's not Medeiros.
Right,
There's no I there, but there is an I there. And I'm like, I think I typed and saved the graphic 4 times.
Yeah.
With Medeiros, oh, I forgot the I. Awesome.
But you got it right on air, and that's what counts.
Well, yes, I got it right. But I've heard you say it on your podcast, so it's been a thrill. So, all right. Let's get the party started. It takes me 2 count-ins. So I usually script the first one. But all right. 3, 2, 1. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Season 2, Episode 21 of the Digital Marketing Dive Podcast. I'm Seth with Goldstein Media, and usually with me is the always amazing, talented, kick-ass Shannon of Diam Business Consulting. But unfortunately, her computer has decided to self-destruct, and she's currently on the hunt for a new one. So she'll be missed today, but she will be on next week, she'll be on before next week because this is actually out 2 weeks later. But she'll have a computer very fast. But today it's a thrill. We have Matt Medeiros, the director of podcasting success. Now I like that title, podcaster success at Castos, who also happens to be our podcasting host of choice. So thank you. We're very pleased with you guys. The full disclosure, being a former journalist, I have to say, it's that way. He is also an avid, prolific podcaster himself. His main, I don't know if you can call it your main podcast anymore, but the one I think you're known for is the Matt Report.
That's correct.
And then you also have South Coast FM, is that still going?
South Coast FM, the WPMinute.com.
Oh, I love the WP Minute today. That one was awesome today.
Yeah. And randomly doing the random show at random.
Oh, I forgot about the random show. And you do audience. Oh my God.
And I do the audience podcast.
Let me guess, you hate podcasting.
I don't know why I still do it, but I do it.
Oh my God. Well, it's your job now. So I guess I gotta make sure I put the random show, and that's with Brad Williams, another WordPresser who is well known in the community. So today we're going to talk about knitting, right?
Yeah, I love it. Crocheting, knitting, hats, gloves. Blankets.
Exactly. Nothing about WordPress, nothing about podcasting, just about knitting and crocheting. No. Today we're going to talk about podcasting and how it can be used for the businesses to drive traffic to your site, increase ROI and brand awareness, and so much more. And I think that I even put some WordPress in there as well because that's how I know Matt from. I know Matt from the WordPress ecosystem. So let's get the party started. So Matt, who the heck are you?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I do a bunch of podcasts. I grew up in the car industry. My family owned they were one of the very first dealerships to open up a Mazda dealership back in the 70s. My grandfather started it, grew up in the car industry. My father and his uncles ran it for a while. They became a Chevy and GM dealership, and we left that business a few years actually before the 2008 financial crisis, when
good timing.
Quite literally all of the automakers went under except for Ford. And we got out of that. We started a digital agency. This is probably like at the cusp of end of 2006, 2007. I was exiting a local ISP. It's an internet service provider. I was the head of product at the time, and started this digital agency with my dad after he got out of the auto industry. And I ran that with him for almost a decade. That's where I started the Matt Report podcast. That's where I got a lot of my digital chops down.
Wow.
And went full-time at a sales role at a hosting company in WordPress called Pagely for a few years.
You were there, yeah.
Yeah, a few years right when I was having my children. When you're, as anyone who's listening who's an entrepreneur, a business builder, especially a digital agency, Seth, as you know, cash flow, stress, you have a team, you have
what
payroll.
is cash flow?
it's just like you are only as good as that last job. And when I had kids, I'm like, I need something a little bit more stable for the old brain cells. So I went back to quote unquote work full time at Pagely. The agency still runs. It still operates.
Oh,
My dad
really?
still runs it. Yep.
That's good.
Still pays the team. And I was just like, I'm going to remove this burden of myself from this and go full time. And then Craig, founder and owner of Castos, approached me. We've known each other for years. And then he approached me mid last summer and he was like, hey man, I'm opening up probably what's the perfect role for you here.
Wow.
And somebody who's into podcasting, somebody who knows sales, somebody who knows product and marketing.
Yeah, you kind of are the perfect fit.
Yeah, would you want to take this role? And I said, yeah, I do. Actually, it sounds great. So that's where I'm at today at Castos.
So you're the digital agency. That's kind of how you found your way to WordPress, I assume. But how did you find your way into podcasts have been around since 2005. Well, whenever the iPod really started. I mean, they were on before then, but not really syndicated. How did you find your way into the audio and podcasting?
So when I was working at that ISP is roughly when you mentioned podcasting sort of was released, and I was heavy into learning things like Linux and open source, and that's how I got into technology. There was, I think, the Linux Show is what it was called, which was one of the very first podcasts that was out there, and I just tuned into that just to learn Linux and open source. And then when I started the agency, I quickly learned from my local WordPress meetup. There was a lot of, as we know today, heavy hitters in the WordPress space. So Jake Goldman of 10up, Jay Tripp, who now works for Sandhills Development, a few of the folks that now work for Jetpack, who originally worked with me at my agency that I had hired.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were all in the same circle. And when I started my agency and I saw how fast Jake Goldman was growing in his agency, 10up, I just, okay, as any business person does, you sort of reverse engineer their success. You say, how are they doing this? And I realized quickly that he just had a ton of connections in the WordPress space. As young as the WordPress space was back then, he had big brands just knocking on, Matt Mullenweg's door or even his door, like, hey, we're looking for a developer to build us techcrunch.com or, properties at Yahoo. And I saw how fast he was making those connections. And I was like, I'm not an engineer. I don't have a team of a big team of people working for me yet. How am I going to get known in this space and how am I going to make connections? Yeah. And I was big into listening to a podcast called Mixergy, and I was like, maybe I'll.
Oh, my first thought is that still going?
Oh yeah, yep, 2,000 plus episodes. Wow. My first thought was maybe I'll do a blog and just interview people and connect with people that way. And then I was, like I said, into Mixergy, and then I thought to myself, well, maybe you can try to be like the Mixergy of WordPress. To quite literally the first 3 episodes that I recorded, I was doing it like the same style, the same intro as Andrew at Mixergy.
Imitation is the best sort of, it's the best kind of flattery is imitation. I mean, that's how you learn.
Yeah.
And
that's how it all started.
Yes, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people have to realize when they start podcasts is getting into things. Listen to your favorite podcast, listen to a few podcasts, and then model yourself off of people and then adjust it to fit you. I mean, would you agree with that?
I agree 100%.
Yeah. So I know I've suggested, I've been podcasting since some version since 2010. Once I found it, I was like, all right, I have to figure out how to do this. This sounds like totally fun. So but one thing I noticed is that it can be quite daunting for people that aren't technologically sound. I mean, now with Anchor, a lot more people can do it for better, for worse. But what tips do you have for people from your experience as a podcaster and Castos for people getting into the world about their show? Like, how can you, what suggestions do you have? Is just get started, or what do you suggest they do? Yeah,
well, number one, you should care and don't care at the same time. So
it's a very weird enigma. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's not sweat all of the fine details in the beginning, knowing that the most important thing is that you're getting your show out there. It's like sitting back and I want to run a 5K one day, and you're just thinking about running, sitting on the couch, and maybe I'll research shoes and running gear and headphones to listen to music, and you're just sitting there researching and doing all this stuff, and you're not even just trying to walk down the street yet to stretch your legs out. That's the same thing with podcasting. So get your content out. let's not sweat the finer details, but at the same time, take in every episode. And I still literally take in every episode I do for all of my podcasts and find the areas that I want to improve in. And again, it doesn't need to be expensive. You don't have to sink all this money. We'd love you to spend $190 for the year at Castos to host your podcast, because you own your content and all that fun stuff. But you don't need to invest a ton of money into it, and you don't always have to overthink it. Unless you're going into like this super competitive space and you're being very calculated about it. I can understand that. But if you're starting out with little to no audience, just get it going. Start stretching that muscle and keep it going, and improve at every episode as best you can.
Yeah, I like to tell people, this is not NPR. You're not Terry Gross.
Right.
It's just, you're not. And I mean, she has her Fresh Air is made into a podcast after it was a radio show. So I mean, different caliber, different genre, really. It's just audio, but it's different genre. That being said, and
there's a ton of not only does somebody like a Terry Gross or a Guy Raz or any of these sort of notable audio figures, not even just podcasters, but audio figures. Not only are there decades of experience, there's just teams of people,
and they don't edit their own podcast.
Right. They don't edit their own podcast. They show up to make audio. They're not making audio and running a business at the same time, to a certain degree.
And so once the podcast is recorded and then they go to Castos, if they're smart, they go to Castos, or they go to any of the other hosting providers, even Anchor, and it's distributed. What tips do you have for people, from your experience as a podcaster, to getting the word out about their show? I mean, because it's kind of one of the things about a website. You build a website and no one's there to hear it. Does it exist? Does a tree fall in the woods kind of analogy? Same thing with a podcast. You can talk into a microphone all day long. No one knows it's there. Is it there?
Yeah. So pulling on the same thread of time and commitment and energy, when I talk to folks at Castos, one of the first questions I'll ask when they're thinking about getting started with a podcast is, how many episodes do you think you can do a month? And oftentimes they'll say, well, look, it'll always start with the most I can do is 2 a month, 4 a month. And I'll always just try to, if they're brand new to this and they don't have an audience, and if this is really not a B2B kind of thing, cut that in half and spend double the time spend that extra time on promoting the show as much as you can. So don't worry about pushing out as much content as possible. Put out half the content you think you can dedicate, and then spend that other half just really promoting it. Because if you can do 4 a month and you're already maxed out and you're stressed and you're worried about it, do 2 and just prepare auto tweets, prepare unique LinkedIn posts, Facebook posts, whatever you want to be in social, or curate a better email list that you can really spend a good hour or so crafting a narrative in an email newsletter that's going to be supplemental or a value add to the podcast. In my opinion, all things should lead back to an email list. And if you can spend that extra time that you would have been just cranking out another episode, spending it on your promotion and your other marketing assets, I think goes a long way.
That's amazing advice. I mean, that's why I always find that people need to really focus on promotion and also not stress out themselves on the podcast. We were releasing these weekly, and Shannon and I looked at each other. We're like, well, that was ambitious.
Yeah. And
we eventually made an announcement. I think it's going to be on this episode tomorrow with Seth Halpern, who's over at WP Engine. And we said, we're coming back to 2 episodes a month like we originally started. But it all started when we had people like Rand Fishkin on the show. We had Mark Schaefer on the show. And we're like, oh my God, we got to get these out sooner. We got to get these out sooner because these are so great. We want to share them. And we're like, well, we have to run our business.
Right.
We have other things to do. We have families to, I have an 8-year-old. She has teenagers. It's like, we can't do this. So we're eventually moving it back to, bi-weekly. So
yeah. My brother, who runs a financial media company called The Trade Risk, he is a prolific YouTuber and blogger, and he puts out all this financial content. He's just getting into podcasting, and he fell for the same trap. You think podcast and you think, well, it's just this 1 hour conversation or half an hour conversation, and you forget that There's the logistics of scheduling, getting people prepared, talking to them. And then there's everything that happens that pulls down a podcast, technical difficulties, bad audio, somebody's just not feeling it. And he's going through those now, and he is literally losing his mind. He's on episode 3, and he's like, Matt, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore because it's just way more work than I thought. And I said, well, he sweats a lot of the details. So I said, you got to pull back on some of those details. He's editing absolutely everything that's, to the spoken word, and it just drowns you if you're trying to get this thing moving and figure yourself out as a podcaster. Like everything else, people start out their podcast or their idea or their product or their service, and they say, I'm going to be X to all of these people. And then 20 episodes in, you have found a completely different voice and you found a completely different topic that you're really interested in. So it's going to change in every 20 episodes or so.
Oh, wow. So it's around 20. That's a very good tip. So would you suggest podcasting for every business owner? Do you think everyone should do a podcast?
I don't think everyone should do a podcast, but I think everyone should prepare to be on a podcast.
Well, I like that. Yeah, that's very true.
I think the best thing you can do is I'm at my home studio. So I'm just using my ATR 2100 USB microphone. It's like $75 or $90 on Amazon.
I have my Blu-ray over here.
Yeah, it's like the best investment that you can make if you're trying to do content marketing. And I say that because you're either going to start a podcast or you're going to record a screencast or you're going to do a video for your business, one of these assets that you're going to create yourself. Or if you're smart, you're going to be on somebody's live stream, somebody else's podcast. And the absolute worst thing you can do in a world of audio and video is have bad audio, right? So
yeah, exactly. Audio kills everything.
Yeah, get rid of the Apple earbuds, with the inline mic that drags up against your shirt or your hair.
Oh, that's the worst.
And just get a $75 microphone. Or I have this Sennheiser headset, which has a great boom mic, and I use this as a backup just in case something happens midstream here.
Yeah.
But also I use this on Zoom calls and stuff like that when I'm presenting. So just invest a little bit into the microphone. So that's a long way of saying not everyone should do a podcast, but everyone should be prepared to be on one, I think.
Yeah, and webinars, and there's still purpose for that stuff. So all right, now tell us a little bit about Matt Report, Southcast, the WP Minute, audience, and then this one, and the random show, or to pick one, or just. I also
do like 3 YouTube channels as well. So
I forgot about yes. Oh my god! And you have 3 little boys. How do you sleep?
Yeah, and a WordPress plugin. So
I forgot about that. Oh my god! Geez. How
do
you do all this?
The audio stuff is really, the podcast stuff for me anyway is fairly easy. Believe it or not, 8 years into this, becoming a little bit more regimented in how I approach this stuff. The biggest thing for me that keeps I hope anyway the quality of the content pretty good is spending time with my guest in a pre-interview. That's a good idea. That's sort of a default thing that I have to do with everyone, unless they are podcasters and they really, really get this thing. But there's a lot of people that approach me to be on the show, on all of the various shows, and it's always like, hey, that's no problem. Let's do it if you have a great story, and you're not just pitching me the same old thing. But let's get on a pre-interview and find just 1, maybe 2 topics, because you know how it goes when you get on a show. You can say, hey, tell me about the top 10 things that you do, and you'll only really get to 1, and everything's sort of spaced out. So I'll really drill down in 15 minutes to kind of build up some rapport, get to know who they are. Get to know one thing they can really speak well to that I can draw out in 30, 40 minutes. And then I just give them the high level overview of what they should expect. Show up, have some energy, have good audio as best as possible. We'll talk for 30 minutes and, we'll just anything I don't edit unless you say something you want me to remove. I'll remove it. But otherwise, it's just the casual conversation. And then
that's what I like about podcasts. That's what I like about podcasts is that I can't listen to Terry Gross. My mom's always like saying like, "Oh, you got to hear Terry Gross this episode." I can't. It's too edited. It's too professional. I like the gaffes. Like when Leo Laporte on Twit fell off his bouncy ball. He sits on a ball and he fell off it one day. He left it in there. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna edit that out." Well, he left that part in, You know, it makes it human. It makes it like, this is fun. What's going to happen next? Kind of thing. So.
The only drawback to that, if I play devil's advocate for a moment, is I do listen to, or I used to listen to a lot of marketing podcasts that take that advice of like just how personal it is, and they turn that into, I don't care about how the audio sounds. So there's some like really, great marketers, like people who I think are doing really good in their job and they have great advice. And then I listen to their podcast and it's like they're in a 15-foot, the ceilings are 15 feet high. It's echo reverb and they're using their laptop microphone. And that's fine if you have to start that way. There's nothing wrong with starting that way. I don't care if you committed a dozen shows that way, but eventually, please upgrade. Like I said, spend the $75 and get a halfway decent microphone, because I literally can't listen to it. Like
it's painful.
It's painful. And the way that I listen to podcasts, probably just like you, my kids are running all over the place. I'm making dinner. I'm outside, like doing something in the yard, commuting or whatever. Like it just needs to be halfway decent audio.
Yeah. So all right. So speaking about halfway decent audio, and there's definitely audio out there that isn't halfway decent. I think you might know where I'm going with this. Maybe not. What do you think about Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces? Because that's all done via your phone. I mean, you can jerry rig your phone with a mic. You can get really into it and make a studio kind of thing for it. Who's going to do that? What's your thought on this stuff?
I mean, the podcaster in me says I like a body of work. I like an archivable, searchable, repurposable, is that a word? Body of audio work or content work. I get the attraction to Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. Marketers love a new thing, and that's always great to just try to get ahead of the curve. But I'm not a huge fan of committing time to something that just vanishes in 24 hours. Like I'm not a huge Instagram stories person or stories on any platform person, probably because I'm old. But I know there's a lot of people that engage that way, and it's fantastic for engaging. I just wouldn't commit. Like if I was starting a podcast or had a podcast like I do now, it would only be a 10% thing for me. Dabble in it, play with it, but I'm not going to commit something to a massive social platform that I don't have control over, like I would a blog or a newsletter or a podcast, even YouTube to a degree. And I want something that shows a body of work. I don't want to put this time into it, and 6 months later, there's like 50 hours of audio just gone that I could have on my website.
It's a journalist to me too. I mean, I was a journalist for 6 years, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I have to keep everything.
Yeah,
I have, even if I never. I mean, even I have podcasts on archive.org that I put up there because I'm like, I'm not going to keep the hosting going for it. Maybe I'll put them on Castos because I can do that. But the idea is that I keep it somewhere. So if I ever need to go back, it's an archive. It's somewhere there. Someone can look at it and say, "Oh man, that was terrible."
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But real fast, let's thank our sponsor real fast. We want to thank Savvy Cow. Not Savvy Cow, as Philadelphians say, Savvy Cow.
Bostonians would say Savvy Ka.
Really?
No, I don't know.
It's Savvy Cal as in calendar. It's a scheduling tool that your recipients will love to use. I've tried all kinds of these suckers. Calendly, they're all the same. You have to have your calendar on one side, that on the other. It's a list of times you got to kind of synchronize. Savvy Cal makes it so that you can actually superimpose your calendar on top of the person who has Savvy Cal's calendar and find the time that works for you. It's great. I love it. The link's in the show notes. Definitely check it out. It's less cumbersome. I love it. It's I'm starting to figure out how to do it for the podcasting show. I haven't figured that one out yet because it's better just to do things the old-fashioned way. But I got to figure that out. But it's pretty good. So all right. So what would be in closing? What would be the biggest tip you could tell people that are in business, small business, mid-sized businesses that want to go into, are intrigued by podcasts, and maybe they know of your podcast, one of your many plethora of podcasts, and they're like, "Well, Matt does it. I like what he does." What would you suggest what one tip that you could say they could take away?
Yeah, one of the things that gets undervalued the most is, the age-old advice is everything takes time. So that's number one. So once you can understand that especially podcasting being the long game, that the connections that you make and the opportunities that arise from a podcast are so undervalued because they are not predictable. There's just tons of opportunities that I've run into, and business to be had, relationships to be made from just the podcast. You know, not even the people that you interview that make connections, but other people just know of you. You know, just like how people get excited still to this day about whatever appearing in the local newspaper. People are just like, oh, I made the newspaper. Like it's still this huge thing,
pride, yeah,
right? That happens. The same is said for podcasting. You know, when I started my local podcast, which is local to the South Coast of Massachusetts, southcoast.fm, I was 2 episodes in. I walked into a local coffee shop that I go to, and somebody's like, oh, you're that podcaster. And I was like, who the hell listens to Matt Report around here? Right. So I was like, oh yeah. Like the Matt Report. And she was like, no, Matt Report, I don't know what you're talking about. You just interviewed this girl, Caitlin, that I know. And Caitlin happens to be an owner of a fitness company down here. And I was like, how did that even happen? Like, how did that happen so fast that like in the local space, it really works. And that's a little, you know, top secret advice. I think people should focus more on local podcasts as well, because you can really dominate a market. But just the act of doing it, people start to recognize you. And at least in the local space, that was a domino effect of where people have, you know, started to refer to me as the local podcasting guy. And it's like, man, I've been doing this for 8 years on the internet with air quotes. And suddenly I do a local show and everyone refers to me this way. And it's just like, how did that happen so fast?
A local celebrity.
Yeah. Awesome. And even in the WordPress space, like I know there's people that don't listen to every single episode, which is totally fine, but they know that I still do it. So they see that consistency stay up and they still know that I'm there and they can always tune in or refer somebody, you know, in the future. So like that long-standing networking is so undervalued.
Yeah. I remember when you were talking about Matt Report, trying to figure out, how you wanted to take it. I think it was like this season. And I was like, is he not going to talk about WordPress anymore? Is he not going to talk about WordPress anymore? And then you started talking about WordPress in a different realm, more in the way of business and stuff. I'm like, I like this better. And then you came out with WP Minute, which is not a minute. Every once in a while, it's like 5 minutes. And this last one,
5 minutes will be the most it'll ever be.
Oh, really? Because the last one was 15 minutes.
Well, that was a special breaking news interview.
Oh, okay. Well, I saw that and I was like, whoa, but it was a really good one. I really enjoyed it. So everyone has to go check out the WP Minute. So the recap, you have the Matt Report at mattreport.com. You have WP Minute at WPMinute.fm.
Nope, the WPMinute.com.
Oh, so close. Southcoast.fm. What else?
Castos.com/audience for the audience podcast.
Audience podcast. The random show is
randomshow.net.
Oh, you got .net there. And then what else you got there?
YouTube.com/Castos. That's where I do my podcast YouTube channel. YouTube.com/plugin for plugin tutorials.
Oh, yeah, he has that too. Yeah, which is really good. He's a busy man.
Just content.
But you're doing what you love, which is what matters. So, Matt, this is so much fun. And so everyone reach out. I mean, those who are watching the video can see that we have a little ticker going on down there. You can email us at hello@digitalmarketingdive.com. You can get all of our links at dmd.fm. You had to get the FM in there. Digital Marketing Dive everywhere else. Twitter, it's smushed because they have some arbitrary character limit. So marketing is squished. But if you're enjoying the season, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, because I'm not a big fan of Apple Podcasts. Podcast directory of your choice, like Podchaser, is fantastic. You know, I put some lists up there, so follow me over there as well. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.